Hello everyone, and welcome to the Prudence Network. This is a space where we have honest and meaningful conversations about life, about growth, and the issues that affect us as women and as a community. So I'm your host, Prudence, and I'm so grateful to have you all here listening, whether you're at home, driving in the car. So today's episode is titled Understanding Therapy and Why Us Women Seek It. Or I don't know if I should say why we need it, but I'll say let's understand what it is and you will decide if you will need therapy, if you will decide. So therapy is a topic that many people are becoming more open about. But for some, it still feels unfamiliar and misunderstood or even intimidating. So in this conversation today, we want to explore what therapy really is. We want to understand. We want to see why women should seek it, I will say. And how important it is, and why prioritizing your emotional and mental well-being is very important. So to help in this topic today, I have my guest. I'd say she's a friend. She's becoming a good friend of mine, Alison, and she has joined me today. And thanks to you, Alison, it's a pleasure to have you here today, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So, do you mind introducing yourself?
Well, yeah, thanks, Prudence. It's actually a pleasure to be here today. I also have been looking forward to this conversation, and thank you for having me here on your network. My name's Alison Awuku, and I, by profession, am a counselor and psychotherapist. So I'm a psychological therapist. I know that there are lots of different types of therapies out there, but I am a psychological therapist and very much concerned with the mental and emotional well-being, and obviously then social, physical well-being of individuals, also spiritual well-being of individuals and groups and communities. So I have a private practice. I work as a private practitioner and a clinical supervisor, and I am also a teacher of counseling and therapy. So my field is very much firmly grounded and focused on mental health, mental and emotional well-being.
Thank you so much, Alison, and welcome once again. It's good to have you here. All right, so now let us dive into icebreaker questions. So let's see how it goes. Let's just break the room. Okay, so what really inspired you to work in this field?
That's a really good starting question, because I haven't always worked in this field. I went to school, went to university. I studied a degree in economics and marketing and worked in the financial services industry for more than 15 years. But I think the thing that really drew me to this field was really an interest in people, in understanding human thinking, human behaviors, what makes people take, and also kind of understanding relationships. And I, for one, myself, have been through a few tricky relationships in my time. And I always wondered, I was always fascinated by, the way people behaved, and the fact that, sometimes in the same circumstances, people would behave differently depending on who they are. And so I was always fascinated. But the other thing also is that I'm very much, I'd like to say, a people person. And so I wanted to take this interest in people and actually not just make it just an interest, but make it, my career, and kind of work work with that and really understand people. So then I went from financial services and went through the training and qualifications to become a psychological therapy. And here I am today. I've never looked back. It's been a fascinating and interesting journey.
That's amazing, Alison. It's amazing that you thought about this later on. Like, I think I'm really good at this, and I think I can help people in this way. And I think that's a lesson to help us. It's never too late to still change your career, to do something that you enjoy. And it's a lesson to many people. And
Absolutely.
if someone met you today, what would surprise them most about you?
Oh, what would surprise people the most about me? I think that, I don't know, maybe just might be that I'm very young at heart. I'm somebody who
Oh,
is
okay.
I'm very young at heart. I'm very playful. I think sometimes people do think that I come across quite serious, but actually I'm really not. So I suppose that might surprise them, but yeah, I think I'm pretty much an open book. I don't think there's much surprise. I'd like to think I'm somebody who is quite transparent. I'm somebody who is quite approachable, somebody who people can comfortably talk to and feel that, you know, they're safe. I like to create safe spaces for people. So yeah, maybe my playfulness, maybe my, you know, there's the inner child in me that always wants to joke around, mess around, make fun out of everything. But I
Yeah.
think that maybe sometimes how I look might be might look a lot more serious than how I actually feel. I don't take myself too
I
seriously
actually
at all.
agree. I agree because I'm surprised that you're playful. So I'm one of those
Very
people who got
playful.
surprised now because I thought you are like straight, serious, professional, and all that. But yeah, now we can be best friends. All right, all right.
Yeah,
Okay, let's
I
dive
like a good
into the.
I like a good laugh. I like a good laugh. I like to laugh till my belly aches, and I like to have fun. So
Oh,
yeah.
that's nice. That's very nice to know. Okay, so diving into today's episode. Right. So for the listeners who may not be familiar with therapy, how would you define therapy in very simple terms, like you are telling a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old? How can we define it in simple terms?
Okay. Therapy is a safe space where you talk to somebody who is trained to really listen to you in every way so that you can feel seen, so that you can feel heard and empathize with you and walk your journey with you without judging you and obviously, you know, making you feel safe. That's it.
Mm. Mm. Thank you. Thank you very much. Because as the word is, it sounds like it's a very complicated thing where people have to do a lot of things to open up, to crack and all that. But it's that simple. So does this mean that I can also be a therapist to a church member, like having a listening ear and not judge, not being professional about it? Can that count as therapy?
Well, that certainly can count as therapeutic. I think when we talk about, you know, therapy in a professional sense, then, you know, obviously what I've just described sounds very simple, very straightforward, but actually there's a lot of work and training that goes behind the scenes. Sometimes to kind of deliver the most simple thing, you need a lot of time and training behind the scenes. So you need to put in the effort to look effortless, so to speak. So certainly listening to somebody without being judgmental is therapeutic, would almost certainly be therapeutic for them. 70% to 80% of what we do as therapists is listen. But obviously, we listen in particular ways. We listen with particular understanding, holding, some theory, some understanding in our minds, understanding how the brain works, understanding how emotions work, understanding how certain triggers can lead to certain behaviors or certain beliefs or ways of thinking. All of that knowledge sits in the background of the listening. And so when we listen to a person as a therapist, yes, we're listening to what they're saying, but we, as therapists, we're also trained to not judge people. We're trained to be extremely self-aware and not to allow our own narratives to get in the way of what somebody else might be saying. We're trained to listen not only to what the content of what the other person is saying, but also what they're not saying. So there's a lot of listening that can go on apart from just hearing what a person is saying. You might be listening to what they're not saying. You might be listening to how they present themselves. You might be listening to their nonverbal cues or nonverbal communications. And being able to connect the dots gives you a greater insight as to actually what might be going on for that person. Being able to elicit information out of individuals, the right type of information that will help them. We're not there to tell people what to do. We're not there to advise people, but we're there to empower people by helping them come to the knowledge by themselves of what's going on, and also helping them find ways, constructive, productive ways to move forward and to go from perhaps where they don't want to be or what they're struggling with to actually where they aspire to be. And a lot of the times where, quite frankly, they might think, oh, we can never get here, or we can never do this or achieve that. So there's a lot of psychological work that goes on. There's a lot of understanding, background understanding, insight that the therapist would have, that perhaps if somebody is not trained to do that work, they may not really have, or they may not appreciate. But having said that, I don't want to take away the importance of being available to each other, to listen to each other, because as humans, we need to have that sense of belonging, that sense of being seen, and that sense of being heard. And that's halfway through the healing process. So that's really important as well.
That's true. I think also, I'm just assuming why you have to listen more and not you being the one speaking a lot. Maybe sometimes you may even put more harm than good. So maybe having someone pour everything out of their heart, and it's also helping them because you are not suggesting a lot of stuff. You are not speaking more than them. I think it really helps. And I think it's something most people don't really know about, because in communities, people are scared of being judged. Even in families, maybe why they are more suicidals lately, it's because even judging my mother, judging my child, can put more harm. So I think listening more, I think everyone should be just like the psychologist or therapist, to know that listen more and speak less, and speak with wisdom.
Yeah.
So in terms of women, in your experience, what are the most common reasons women seek therapy?
So the most common reasons, very simply, anxiety, depression, and there are different types of anxiety disorders out there. There are different types of depressive disorders out there. There's also things like, especially with the with social media and kind of that online space. There's a lot of eating disorders, low self-esteem issues, body dysmorphia disorder, where you see your body in a certain way. Those are the common things, but a lot of those other like disorders may be like and also post-traumatic stress disorder or trauma. A lot of people have gone through trauma at some point, and I think that with the with mental health becoming a lot more kind of acceptable to talk about in society, we're hearing a lot more about traumas that people have gone through, and they're more kind of willing to talk about it. But anxiety and depression are always disorders that sit behind some of these other disorders that women might present with. Anxiety, because women tend to have a lot to juggle with, going through different
Yeah.
stages of life, different changes in the body, different responsibilities, can cause a lot of anxiety for women, and also depression, maybe because they can't always talk about the things that are going on for them. People have to bottle in things, and after a while it's not sustainable anymore to hold down things that are not going well. So anxiety and depression, in terms of common mental health problems, those are the two that women are really plagued with. And even when you find that somebody has another type of thing going on, there's normally anxiety and depression, or one of them sitting beneath that issue or that presentation.
All right. Thank you, Alison. I feel like both men and women, we need the same amount of therapy. I don't know if that makes sense. Like we are the same, but we are more open. As much as we think we are not open, we are bottling things on our chest. I still feel like it's a bit easier to crack a woman than to crack a man. I don't know if that makes sense. So
it
yes, so I think
does, yeah.
Yes. So are there life stages in a woman where they are more likely to need more support, or it's like just as soon as you are a woman or 18 or even 17 years old, just seek therapy, just go or there are stages like, I think now I really need therapy because it's been a lot. So can you advise on that? Because for me personally, I don't know when to seek for therapy, because I've just been taking it one day at a time. I've just been saying it will be okay tomorrow. So tomorrow it may be okay, but the day after it's even worse. So is there a stage where you have to say, I need to speak to someone?
I think you need to speak to somebody when you're finding that you can't cope with the day-to-day challenges, where you're unable to cope. So we all have a degree of resilience, and we can all kind of deal with a level of stress, right? Stress is not always a bad thing. Sometimes stress is positive because it kind of stimulates us to do the things that we need to do. But then there needs to be a balance where it tips over and the stress becomes too much. It means that we're not able to cope. And that's where we start to feel like we can't deal with the day-to-day activities. So it's not just about having a bad day. It's not just about having a bad afternoon. It's about where you feel maybe for a period of 3, 4, 5, 6 days, and then it's going to a week, a couple of weeks, you're struggling and you're really not able to cope with the day-to-day stuff. So you're not able to do the things that you used to, or even sometimes people can be quite high functional in certain areas. So they'll go to work, they'll have high performance, but then they get home and they can't do anything. Or they spend a lot of time maybe, breaking down, maybe crying, and for no reason, or not no reason, no apparent reason to them. And so I think when it starts to get that way, I think it's really important to, for example, speak to your GP and try and get some help, because the chances are things potentially would only get worse. Problems don't just go away because we think, oh, we wish them to go away or we don't want to talk about them. Yeah, but actually addressing them, actually kind of exploring what's going on and opening up that box. And sometimes it might be uncomfortable, but it's important that we don't ignore problems. And in terms of age, in terms of stage of life, anytime, there's no particular period, anytime as a woman in your life, it could be when you're 10, it could be, because we're all experiencing life differently and we all have different levels of coping and resilience and different tools and different techniques. But at some point, if it gets to a point where you're struggling to cope, that's the time to get some help. It's always useful to start with your doctor, with your GP, and move that way. Or if you know kind of people who can support you therapeutically, then obviously, but there's no particular life stage or age where you should be seeking therapy.
And wow, I think it is a really huge topic. What are some common misconceptions women have about therapy?
Yeah, there are a few. So misconceptions could be, well, I'm going to be judged if I talk to my therapist about this. They'll look at me differently because let's face it, we live in society where people are always judging. And the reason why it's useful to speak to somebody who is a professional or who is a trained therapist is because they are trained not to judge. They're trained to empathize with you, to have unconditional respect for you and acceptance. They're trained to not allow their own beliefs or their own thought processes to get in the way. So fundamentally, when people think I'm going to be judged, that's quite normal because that's what we do all the time, every day, day-to-day life.
Yeah.
People are always judging. But when you get into that space, that's not likely to happen. Sometimes people are not clear about how confidential their information will be. Confidentiality is really important, and we as therapists will not share information unless there's an absolute need to do that. And normally, generally speaking, we would have a conversation with the client or the patient about it. So confidentiality and kind of fear of being judged, fear of airing your dirty linen in public, fear of maybe if I talk about it, then I'm giving into the thing that I'm worried about, or the thing that's plaguing me, or the thing that's a problem. Say, so for example, I feel like harming myself. If I talk about it, then maybe it makes it real that this is actually happening. So those are the common things. Or I'm not strong enough. If I'm talking to some stranger about my problem, it means that I can't cope. I've always been strong. I've always been resilient. I've always been this force of nature in my community. And I can't afford to look that vulnerable. So those are some of the things that can get in the way. The stigma, the societal stigma, then the internal stigma around kind of speaking to somebody, getting help. Those are some of the reasons. Although it's getting better, people are getting more and more open to therapy, but there are still communities and cultures where that's really kind of a common theme in terms of therapy and trying to get the help that women need.
That brings me to a question. So do you also work with the police or the NHS mental health because of some of the things you hear from the clients, or you promise them you will not pass on this information? Because yes, some may think to take their lives, and some may say, I really feel like killing him. You get it? So because you have this information, you have to, like your profession, you are not supposed to pass on this information. I think it's something people are also curious about. Like, if I really tell Alison that this man really gets on my nerves and one day I'm definitely taking his life, do you work with the police? Do you work with the council, the NHS? Maybe you can help us on that as well.
Okay, so yeah, our work is very important, and we have a responsibility, like other professions that within the health or education or peacekeeping, like the police. We have a responsibility to safeguard individuals and the public, and so normally when we start to work with a person, there's a kind of like setting up the way we work, or what we call the therapeutic contract, where we will be very upfront and clear about the fact that what we talk about in the therapeutic setting is confidential, but however, there are exceptions to confidentiality. And I think that's the case with medical doctors, with nurses, with social workers, where there's a risk of serious harm to an individual or somebody else, or where there's a safeguarding issue, then normally we would say that those are exceptions to confidentiality. So if you're disclosing that, say for example, after a session, you're going to go off to the train track and you're going to throw yourself on the track, then that information will not remain with me, because I have a duty of care to safeguard your safety. And equally, if there's a child at risk, if it becomes apparent in the therapy sessions that there's a child at risk, then I have a responsibility to kind of maybe contact social services, depending on what the circumstances are. But this is all transparent. This is all stuff that's transparent upfront, and so that it's no surprise when it needs to happen. But we do have to work with other agencies within society, other professionals, to make sure that we safeguard people. So if somebody comes and tells me, well, I've got a bomb that I'm going to detonate, of course I'm going to be calling the police, and I'm going to be kind of making sure, because the public's safety is going to be compromised. So there are exceptions to confidentiality, and those are normally stated at the start of the therapeutic relationship or the therapeutic session. And when it happens that we have to break confidentiality, as much as possible, we have a discussion about what we have to do, and we reiterate the contract and say, this is to safeguard yourself and to safeguard others as well.
Absolutely. Yes. And in terms of confidentiality, does it mean you will be the person handling one person's case until they say, I think I'm okay now, Alison? Or is there a case where maybe your colleague will be handling or continuing with the same case, so that we just make it clear for the others?
Well, I mean, if there's something that's happened, it depends on what the case is or what the situation is, right? So if you're a mother and you have young children within the age of consent, and you've had a partner who maybe is aggressive in the home, and then you disclose to me that, well, there's been violence, there's been aggression in the presence of the children, then I have a responsibility to contact social services and report that as a safeguarding issue. It doesn't mean that I stop working with the mother. It doesn't mean that we stop having therapy. But all of this really is to get additional support. This is not to throw people in the lion's den. It's to make sure that we safeguard the safety of children, vulnerable adults in society, or anybody else whose safety might be seriously compromised. So it depends on the circumstance. If it's like a criminal thing where there's terrorism or financial crime, then if that needs to be reported to the police, it will get reported to the police. I probably will not carry on working with that person. Because then it kind of changes the dynamics of what happens next.
It does, yeah.
So, I mean, but I think the really important thing to say is that as the therapist is not alone. So we all as therapists have supervision. and even when you're a supervisor, you are supervised at least within the UK. And so we take certain things to supervision, not necessarily disclosing the identity of the patient or the client that we're working with, but disclosing the situation and talk about it in supervision. And so normally we have the help of another more experienced professional to work with and come to the right decision. It might be sometimes that we don't need to necessarily report something because we have to assess risk. We have to, if somebody says, well, I'm just thinking I don't want to leave anymore. Okay, but yeah, that could be saying a lot of things. Let's just understand what the actual risk is in this situation. Is it just a fleeting thought, or is it something that they have a plan and an action to do? And if they have a plan and action to do something to kind of maybe stop their lives, then obviously we need to take action. We need to make sure that we contact the GP, contact the relevant services, and work alongside the other agencies to ensure that person's safety. But if we assess the risk and it's a figure of speech because somebody is just really in a desperate situation, then it's not necessarily something that we're going to be contacting other agencies or other professionals about. So it's about, listening to the individual, and it's about really understanding, are they making flipping statements because they're just really not finding the right vocabulary or way to articulate themselves, or are they actually in a situation where the risk of actually doing something to harm themselves or to harm somebody else is very high? So risk assessment is very important. It's a very important aspect of what we do in our work.
Oh, and okay, that's interesting. So as a therapist, do you feel, I think this person needs to speak to someone, or you can see? As in, do they need to speak with you first? Maybe just 2 lines.
You mean before
in the society,
the therapy?
In the society, just in the society, or at church, do you see at church, like, or even in your office, like, I think this person needs therapy, because you'll be seeing them maybe every day? Are there signs that are visible, written on their faces, that I think she's going through something? Or you need them to speak to you first, maybe 5 lines to say, I think you need help. So with your experience, how do you see it? Is it written over people's faces, or they need to say something first?
I like that question, Prudence.
Yeah. Because for me, I'm a very bubbly person, but I think I need therapy, and I am the opposite of what's going on in my head. So how do you guys see it?
Okay. And it's interesting that you say that, because the simple answer to your question is, I come across a lot of people, quite frankly, day to day, regardless of where, situation or where they are, environment, where I think, they could do with some sessions, actually. I try not to take my work hat to, every environment, right? So when I'm doing work with a client or a patient in front of me, I'm fully focused, and it's almost like the therapeutic space is a sacred space where that exploration can happen, and there's clear focus on that individual, and I'm clearly focused on working, because it's quite emotionally, mentally, psychologically draining work. So I know that a lot of people think, well, counseling, you're just having a chat with somebody, but the therapist, there's a lot of work that the therapist is doing mentally, emotionally, psychologically, to hold space for that client, to carry them, and to make sure that they're doing the right kind of exploration and the right psychological work to move the client forward. And so I try not to go out of my work environment with the mindset of work, if you see what I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
because otherwise I'd
Yeah.
be
You will
drained
not
all the
enjoy your
time.
life.
Yeah, but I certainly see behaviors. I certainly see, ways in which people present themselves, things that people do or not do, so many things that make me, with the knowledge that I have as a therapist, make me realize that actually, fundamentally, there's something in this person's narrative that's where there's been a disruption or a psychological disruption or interruption that requires some work, because sometimes we see people, we only see the surface. We don't actually really see what's underneath, the reason why they're doing what they're doing or saying what they're saying or presenting in the way they're presenting. And so we judge them on that basis, on the basis of how we see them.
Yes.
But actually, there's normally a lot more going on for the individual. And a lot of people are not necessarily self-aware to recognize that it's because of this thing that happened in the past or this experience that I had that's making me behave in a way that's disproportionate to what actually is going on right now. There's that level of self-awareness is not there for most people. And so what you get from most people is just behaviors that maybe sometimes to other people just don't make sense. Doesn't make sense. But as a therapist, a lot of the time you can see that it would really help you to kind of spend a bit of time in therapy and talk about what's going on for you. So that to me is something I see all the time in very, very many people, and scaringly many people. But
Yes.
I think that therapy is one of those things that I reckon everybody would benefit from, because we all have times in our lives where we've been let down, where we've gone through challenges that we found very difficult. And the things that we go through don't just go away once we've experienced them. They do have an impact on us. They have an impact on how we come across, how we respond, how we think, how we behave. And sometimes those behaviors may not be appropriate, may not be relevant given the context of what's happening in your current situation. But because you've carried that from a past narrative, you're behaving or you're thinking in certain ways. So I think everybody would at some point benefit from therapy. And short answer to your question is, yeah, I see a lot of people who I
Yes.
think.
Yeah, I think you have a gift, because if I was me, wow, in this world, I would be saying, I think that person needs therapy. Definitely. I will even approach those people. That one needs a psychologist, because I'm so glad I'm not in that field. Okay, so as we conclude, as we go to our conclusion, for someone considering therapy or feeling unsure, what should they expect in their first session?
Okay, so if you're feeling unsure, I would say that ask for an opportunity to have a chat with the person that you're thinking of doing therapeutic work with. A lot of therapists, a lot of good therapists will offer the opportunity to have some sort of free consultation, maybe 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes consultation, just to see how they work, because different therapists have different approaches to doing therapeutic work. There are different therapeutic modalities out there, and people train in different approaches, and sometimes maybe a particular therapist's approach may not be the one that you will work best for you. And so I think it's very important to for both parties to have an initial conversation just to get a sense for how the other person is, how they work, so that you can ask any questions that you want to ask, from how much do they charge to, what therapeutic style do they use, and, just get a feel, but also get your questions answered. Because I think that hopefully helps take the edge off for a lot of people, right? And so if a therapist offers you that opportunity, do take it. Otherwise, expect to go in to your first session, expect to kind of feel safe, right? Not be judged, feel safe, have the ear of your therapist, somebody who will empathize with you, not sit there and feel sorry for you and say, poor you. But we always say empathy is actually walking in that person's shoe. It's not, if somebody falls down a hole, it's not looking at down the hole and going, oh, are you okay? Oh no, I'm so sorry. But it's actually going into the hole with that person and actually trying to feel and experience what they're experiencing. So you should feel heard, you should feel seen, you should feel safe, you should feel that what you talk about is confidential unless there's a reason for it to not be confidential. So all of those things, the therapist should be able to make you feel at ease in that space. And not everyone is trusting immediately, but at least over time, you should be able to build a trusting relationship with your therapist. Because let's face it, for a lot of therapists, their clients are saying things to them that they've never told anybody else, or they might never tell anybody else. So creating that safe environment is really important. And, I have so many clients who say, I've never said this before. I've never said this. This is the first time I'm talking about this. And it's a really kind of sacred space to be in. And it's a privilege to be on that journey with an individual, but then, expect that safety, expect to be heard, expect to be seen, and expect to have clarity. You go in kind of feeling like you're all tangled up in your knots, and you come out feeling like you've untangled the knots, and you're able to have a bit more clarity about life.
That is very helpful. I think that will help many people, running away from many women, many people who will listen to this, that you are stepping into a very safe space and you have somewhere to start. What you have said, it means when I come to you, I have somewhere to start from. And it also brings me to this question. I'm very curious. Like, do psychologists themselves, do they need therapy, or the training they got was enough? When they are done with that case, they are moving on with their life, they are making their food, they're going to the playground with their kids. Do they themselves need therapy to empty their heads? Because sometimes I feel when you have a case and you are still thinking about it, even at home, with your husband, with your kids, even if you don't share, does it affect you, what you have heard throughout the day?
So that's a really good question. And one of the things that I've talked about is self-awareness. And part of there's a lot of training with like counseling training that emphasizes being aware of who you are as a person, being aware of your own past, your own relationships, and so that you can be able to properly empathize with the other person. All of what we learn as counselors, as psychotherapists, are things that we apply to ourselves first. Right. So when I was thinking, okay, I want to be a counselor, I quite fancied that because I'd been to a counseling session. I thought, yeah, this is what I'd like to do. I thought I'd like to help people. And then when I started the training, little did I know that needed to start with me. I was in for a rude awakening. And it was actually tough. It was actually a tough journey because it kind of ruffled a few feathers, and you have to open up some of those wounds, some of those doors that you've shut, yourself. You have to deal with them because you're not going to sit in front of somebody and expect them to open up when you cannot open up yourself. And so part of the
Absolutely.
training was a lot of self-reflection, a lot of exploration of our own stuff. And we had to spend a lot of time in therapy ourselves, sorting out our own stuff. That's mandatory, by the way. That's not like
Yeah.
it's a good idea. We recommend you have to be in therapy, especially when you're in your qualification stages of studies. You have to be in therapy because also, by the way, some of what we learn will trigger some of the things that will require you to actually figure things out for yourself. So there's so much I learned about myself just by my training. But then, yes, I mean, we go into sessions and sometimes you never know what a client is going to choose to talk to you about or what's going to come up. And so we kind of experience vicarious trauma. And that's trauma as a result of their own trauma, as a result of sitting in front of a client and listening to their own trauma.
Wow.
However, do I have clients who are therapists and counselors themselves? Absolutely. And do I kind of get help myself? Absolutely, when I need to, because some of the things that you hear about are quite frankly big. I think, it gets to a
True.
point where you get used to the shocks because sometimes you think, sometimes you have clients who say, what I'm about to tell you is really going to shock you. And it's got to a stage now where I think, okay, go on then, shock me. Because you hear a lot of things, and that will sometimes, in as much as when you're in the session with the client, you're fully focused on the client. When you move away from that session, it might trigger you. And so then that might be things that you need to either take to your supervisor or take to personal therapy and process as well for yourself. So yes, absolutely. We do. We are humans. We feel like everybody else feels. We get triggered like everybody else gets triggered. We're sensitive like everybody else is sensitive. And so, yes, do we need the help? We have had our own relationships that have been challenging like everybody else. We have people who have betrayed us like everybody else, or that we've betrayed like everybody else. So yeah, we do need the help
You do need
as well.
therapy. Yeah. I think this is the only profession, or one of the few professions, that AI is not going to take over because a robot doesn't have compassion, and it's one of the things people are going to need until Christ comes, because you cannot be telling a computer, you cannot be telling ChatGPT how you're feeling. ChatGPT will just say, well, I agree with you. You can do this.
No, but funny enough, that's a very interesting topic you bring up, because people are using AI for a level of therapeutic support, right? So
wow.
yes, artificial intelligence is being used, right? Now, artificial intelligence has caused some havoc because people have taken their lives using artificial intelligence as a therapeutic resource. But for some people, it's helped give like high level kind of help or responses, but you've got to use it with the mindset of, like you said, you don't get compassion from, and there are certain nuances with being in a room with another person. And, ChatGPT will not see non-verbal communication. ChatGPT will not see you. If you're very bubbly, right? If you came to me, and it's interesting because you said earlier on, oh, I'm a very bubbly person. If by character you're not normally very bubbly, and then you came in one day into a therapy room and you were very bubbly and you were very lively, you were very chatty, that's, for me as a therapist, an indication that something's not right. That's an indication that that's perhaps a defense mechanism, because people use humor, people use, being kind of like extroverts and extroverted type behavior as a way of masking what's really going on for them. So there's the person who is naturally like that, and then there's a person who uses that humor or uses that as a mask to cover, right? And likewise, if you're somebody who maybe doesn't normally wear makeup, since we're talking about women, and one day you come into the therapy room heavily made up, yeah, you look very nice, but I'd be wanting to kind of understand what's going on.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there are
Yeah,
certain things like that AI would not necessarily pick up on.
yeah, I agree. All right. This has been so interesting and very educative. I know I had said as we conclude. Okay, any last words from you before we close to someone who is listening and hesitant or struggling to seek help? Do you have any last words you want to tell someone struggling to seek help or not knowing where to start?
I just want to say that if you're struggling, you don't have to struggle alone. It's I understand that it can be very challenging out there, but as humans, we were not wired to go through life by ourselves. We have in our brains various parts that do things that help us to experience well-being. And so by walking your journey alongside somebody who will empathize with you, who will respect you unconditionally, and who will be honest and authentic with you, that's going to provide you the safety, the space that you need to actually heal. So you don't have to struggle alone. Get some help. And if you're not able to speak to people around you, if they're not able to fully support or understand you, speak to a counselor, speak to a therapist. If it doesn't work out with one, it doesn't mean that it's not going to work out with another one.
Thank you so much, Alison, for sharing your insight today and for helping us, me especially. I had the privilege to understand therapy in such a meaningful and honest way, something we don't see on TV or in movies, but this has been so honest. And I believe this conversation will help so many women who may be curious about therapy, but unsure about taking that first step, which is the very hard step to take. And to everyone who has been listening, I know men and women, even children, will listen to this. I hope today's conversation has helped you understand that seeking support is not a sign of weakness, but it's actually a sign of courage. It has made you think, I think I need help. And it's a sign of self-awareness, as we have heard from Alison. Sometimes we carry so much silently, thinking we must handle everything on our own. And in my country, in Zimbabwe, they say, oh, you're a man. Why are you crying? Be strong like a man and all that. And I think it has put so many people down or hide. But conversations like this, they remind us that it's okay to seek help. It's okay to process our emotions, our experiences, and to prioritize our well-being. So as we close, you've been listening to the Prudence Network, where we create a space for honest conversations. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If this episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who may need it, or just share it with everyone, because we don't know who needs it and who doesn't. So let's just share. So Alison is on TikTok, and I think she's working on her social media accounts, but we will do, I will put her TikTok account there so that you follow, you hear those nuggets which she posts sometimes. I'm just putting pressure on her so that she posts more often. And
thank you.
So this is not the only episode we have with Alison. I think we'll have 2 episodes, and we see how it will be going. But we will be looking as well into, unprocessed trauma and stress showing up later in daily life. So I think it's a very huge topic, some things we just carry around with. So just look forward to the next episode. So until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.